So, good morning, everybody. Those of you who wake up early and joining us to open the second day of the conference, fascinating conference, and we have ahead of us, I think, according to the agenda, a fascinating day. And without further ado, I'll start the session, the first session on oil and gas. And as we already started to discuss yesterday, and it is floating, a major question stands when oil and gas, and also in this many respects coal or fossil fuel, are going to peak. Are they going to peak in terms of production this decade, next decade, maybe the 2040s? Maybe they are not. It's a major question because since I remember myself working on those issues, peak oil was foreseen to be in the late 1990s, 2000s, 2010, so on and so forth. Now we're to 2023, and we still don't see the end. So we'll start to discuss oil and gas exploration, but much beyond that, some geology, carbon capture, and many other issues which are related to oil and gas exploration, but also exploitation, production, exploitation, and utilization. And our first speaker this morning is Mr. George Kovacic. Kovacic, and sorry, George, if I don't pronounce your name correctly. He's an energy advisor from the Grossprock International Group. He is in Canada. So good morning, George. In fact, I believe it's 1:30 a.m. in Canada, or where are you located?
Well, good morning, everybody. Fortunately, I'm in Western Canada in Vancouver, so it's only 10:30 in the morning.
Just a minute, we have some technical problem. Unfortunately, we have this problem with George, and I hope that I'm fine. Yes. So we will shift. Yes, I'm fine. Yes. We'll shift to a second speakers on the list, and this is maybe at this stage, I will ask the panelists to join me. Please, Professor Stavri Dima, an independent energy consultant from Albania. Please, Stavri, join us here. Professor Victor Mocanu, and sorry, my friends, for maybe mispronounce your names. He's a professor of geophysics and dean of the Geology and Geophysics University of Bucharest from Romania. Thank you, Victor, for joining us. And Mr. Tassos Vlasopoulos, sorry again if I mispronounce your name, the CEO of the Hellenic Upstream, the Hellenic Energy in Greece, and he is our keynote in this morning. So I'll start with you, Professor Stavri Dima. Either if you prepared several slides, so please, you are welcome to the podium, and to have the first presentation this morning, and we are going to discuss a wide array of issues, not only focusing on the direct upstream oil and gas exploration, but also on related issues as discussed. Professor Stavri, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. So I will explain something in short words, and after this I have maybe 5 or 6 slides to illustrate this what I will read. Albania is one of the few countries in Europe that has a significant petroleum production. Oil exploration and exploitation in Albania began in 1918 as a result of the interest shown by foreign companies from Italy, France, USA, and Great Britain. Consequently, some oil-bearing fields were discovered in sandstone deposits such as Drašovica, Patos Verbasi Kučova, and Patos Marinza. After 1960, the first oil-bearing field in Visoka was discovered in the carbonate section. The discovery was followed by other oil-bearing field discoveries also in the carbonate section, such as Goriško Culj, Cakran, Amonica, Delvina, etc. Gas exploration and exploitation in Albania begins in 1955. The first gas-bearing field was discovered in 1963 in the Divjaka structure, where was followed by the discovery on other gas-bearing fields such as Fracula, Balaj, Krujevit, Panaya, etc. During the last 3 decades, the petroleum exploration and exploitation are being carried out in compliance with the provisions of the law 7746, dated 28 of July 1993, petroleum law as amended. From 1991 to the present, contracts have been signed and several foreign companies have been involved in petroleum operation for oil and gas exploration. Offshore area, 14 companies, and onshore area, 16 companies. In 2001 was started exploration activities in the Shpiragu area in the blocks 2 and 3 by the Occidental Albanian Company, when the Shpiragu 1 well was drilled and the presence of oil and gas in the Shpiragu structure was confirmed. On November 4, 2013, Petromanas Energy and Royal Dutch Shell announced positive test results from Shpiragu 2 well, so confirmed Oxy discovery almost 10 years ago in the structure Shpiragu. Shell informs that Shpiragu is expected to be a field similar to Val d'Agri in Italy. Knowing the figures of Val d'Agri that in a day gives 85,000 barrels, the Canadian Research Institute Oil and Gas Investment has evaluated that oil reserve in the Shpiragu area reached from 500 to 800 million barrels and the billions of the cubic meter of gas, which makes Shpiragu to be considered one of the most important oil discoveries in the region. Development of production in the existing oil fields administered by the Alpetrol Oil and Gas Company is being realized as part of petroleum contracts with foreign or local investors as well as by Alpetrol itself. After 2017, with the closing of activity by the oil deep refining plant in Balshi, Albania can no longer produce fuel for vehicles. During the period 2018 to 2021, only a part of local crude oil production from 20% to 60% is refined in the existing countries' refineries, mainly for production of bitumen and heavy fuels. Crude oil exports during this period were around 60 to 80% of the total amount of local production of crude oil, which has been from 900,000 tons to 1,400,000 tons per year. During 2022 and today, in accordance with the petroleum law, except of existing oil and gas exploration activities, the Ministry of Energy, through the Order of Minister, dated April 26, 2022, offers 2 other blocks in Panaya and in Block C, that is called, for petroleum exploration. Respective contracts are now under negotiations. As regards further petroleum potential in Albania, based on the geological studies as well on seismic data acquired by Alpetrol and those acquired in the recent years by the foreign companies, it appears that Albania, in spite of the existing oil and gas fields, still have a very good potential and is very promising area for further exploration in both onshore and offshore. The legal framework provides a considerable flexibility to the government in negotiating the terms and conditions for entering in a petroleum agreement with oil companies. At the same time, these laws provide enough incentives and flexibility to attract international oil companies and thus stimulate oil exploration in the country. Finally, it is very important to underline that based on the legal framework in force, all the natural hydrocarbon reserves that may exist in the underground deposits on the economic areas offshore and onshore that lie within the jurisdiction of Albania are the exclusive property of the Albanian state. And to continue with these few slides, I can underline that it's important to be clear that the presence of the oil reserves in Albania has now more than 100 years. That is proved, and we have in place now a lot of oil fields associated with gas, and in the same time the existing gas fields now are how to say, completely depleted. But the interest for new oil and gas discoveries is continuing. It's important to underline that the presence of the gas fields in the Albania are a good news, a good important news, and has the possibility to continue with interest for new exploration of the gas in sandstone and with associated gas together with the oil in the limestone in the central and southern part of Albania. Actually, as I mentioned, there are in place 3 companies which are working for the exploration activity in Albania. One of the most important is the Shell company, which is focused on the blocks 2 and 3. I cannot show. There are light with the green, these blocks that are under the contracts of Shell. And another is the Eni, Italian company, which has a new exploration contract in the area of Domrea, in the northern part of the green. This is the small picture in the green field in the center of Albania. And another is the company Delvina Gas, which is in evaluation period for the existing gas field in Delvina. As regards the existing oil fields, there are some other companies that have signed petroleum agreements with Albanian government in the oil fields that are administered by the state company Alpetrol. And one of the most important is the Bankers Company, which has been before 3 or 4 years as a Canadian company, but now is the shares are by the Chinese company. And this is the most important oil field in Albania, which is considered as the biggest oil field onshore in Europe. Another important company which has signed the contracts with the Albanian government and Alpetrol as well is the Terra Oil Swiss, and the other is the Ania Oil and Gas, which are investing in the developing of the existing oil fields in the Balshi Ekal oil field and the Visoka oil field.
Stavri, please sum up.
Sorry?
Please sum up.
Yeah, I finished. So this is a graph that shows the how to say, the evolution of the oil production in Albania, which has the peak in 1974 with 2.5 million tons, and now we have on the end of the graph we have the increasing of the oil production by the investment of foreign companies. Those are 2 blocks that are under the negotiation for the new petroleum contracts, and this is the possibility for further exploration in onshore and offshore as well. And finally, this is the legal framework that manages the activity on exploration and production in Albania. The main law is for the how to organize and manage the petroleum exploration, and the second law has to do with the fiscal system in the petroleum activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stavri. Thank you very much. And now, please join us. Yes. And now we'll get back to George Kovacic. So, hello, George.
Hello, I hope you can hear me well.
Yes, please just, if you can increase the volume.
Can you hear me well now?
Yes, now we hear you very well. So sorry for that technical problem. Glad to have you on board. And George and the other speakers, we have about 7-8 minutes to each speaker. So please try to stick to the times. And George, the floor is yours.
Okay, I will be fast and efficient while I'm getting the presentation up, which I hope you can see. I will thank everybody and thank this wonderful organization for organizing this dialogue, the 14th on energy. It's very important because we need leadership in our region. So what I'm going to touch on today is a more global perspective. After a couple of emails, I understood people were covering some of the local issues. So I'm going to outline the position of Southeast Europe more in the global perspective. A quick disclaimer, if you're using anything from my presentation, please let me know and I'd be pleased to make sure you're interpreting it correctly. I'd like to start with this slide here, the realism of oil demand. There was a great experiment during COVID, during the lockdown. Okay, so I'll just continue to speak and I'll use a lot of words if you don't see the slides. So if we go back during the COVID period, during the top lockdown of the period, during travel restrictions, total oil demand fell only about 20%. And if we go later in 2020, that demand actually started increasing as of June. So it was no longer a 20% decrease or about 20 million barrels. And Dr. Edmond mentioned that as well. We've always been talking about peak demand and peak supply. And we're seeing all the projections during COVID from 2020, 2021 were actually incorrect because in March of this year, we had record high oil demand. And this demand from projections is expected to keep on growing this year and coming years. I looked at various presentations for this projections for this presentation, and most agree for the next 10 years, we're going to have increasing demand for oil and natural gas, and some figure it'll be going on for the next 20 or 30 years. I'm pretty confident we'll be using oil and gas at this level and higher levels for the rest of our lives and the lives of our children and grandchildren. At the same time, and I hope you can see my slides, at the same time, we're having peak supply coming, and that's happening because there's not enough investment happening in oil and gas. And that's the key point I will be discussing in this presentation. You know, the International Energy Agency and other ones are saying that we're having a supply crunch happening very soon. Are you able to see my slides by now?
Unfortunately not, but please continue as the technical staff is trying to bring your presentation back, but please continue to speak.
I will.
You very well.
Very good. And I'll share the presentation with everybody after. The key item is that realism has been heard and understood by many in the oil and gas industry right now, and that is the need for reliable, efficient, and stable supply of energy. And that means a stable supply of hydrocarbons because today over 80%, in fact 82 or 83% of all energy used in the globe are oil, gas, and coal. And I'm going to start with if you could see, with BP CEO Looney. About 3 years ago, he was the first major CEO that came out and said, we got to transition from oil and gas. We got to go beyond petroleum. That changed this year, a couple of months ago, when he said we need more oil and gas investment. And actually, BP has been following the strategy for the past couple of years because they've entered into many new projects globally, even after they said they weren't going to do that about 3 years ago. Similarly, earlier this month, Exxon on disclosure stated that it is impossible to have net zero and highly unlikely to have net zero global emissions by 2050 because people will not accept a large drop in standard of living. And this is very key for our region of Southeastern Europe, and we'll get to that in the coming up slides. If we go further in this realism for reliable and efficient and stable supply of energy, COP-CO2 president and ADNOC CEO has come out with similar messaging. We have to come in terms with some realities. We need all sources of energy, which include oil and gas. He also came out, our aim should be focused on ensuring we phase out emissions from all sectors. That means from the renewable sectors to the battery sectors, from mining, not just oil and gas. And he stated, and this is the president for COP28, you may have seen some of the controversy in the media, there will be a continued role for oil and gas for a foreseeable future. And this is very important for the region because when I bring this up to people from the region, they say, well, these are not Europeans, these are oil and gas companies, these are people from the Middle East. But in reality, the same messaging is happening in European Union. The president of France, Mr. Macron, recently called earlier this month for a regulatory break on environmental matters in Europe. And this is important because politicians in the European Union are seeing the so-called green energy tape is pushing more and more manufacturing elsewhere. And this is a huge problem. Manufacturing is leaving, high-paying jobs are leaving. At the same time, the price of energy in Europe is becoming higher and higher, and it's unsustainable. It's not going to work. High-cost renewable energy will not work in Europe because it's too expensive for too many people, particularly in Southeast Europe, and I'll get to that in a second. And this realism has even reached the Brussels, and I hope you can see this presentation, because they're understanding that we need reliable, efficient, stable supply of energy, which means cost-effective energy, because if climate wins and the rest of society loses, we'll never achieve net zero. And if you haven't seen this, this is all from articles from the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, all the latest and greatest from the past month. Why is this important for Southeast Europe? And why is this organization, IENE, and these dialogues incredibly important? Because Southeast Europe remains poor. A lot of people in this region are living on less than 200 euros a month, a lot of pensioners, but they're proud people. That's perhaps a problem, that we're a little bit too proud. Because of our proudness, we are poor, because we're paying by energy poverty, we're paying because we have a loss of residents because of energy poverty, a lower standard of living, and even environmental degradation. With the price of high-cost energy that's now happening in Central and Eastern Europe and Southeast Europe, people are going more to traditional forms of energy like wood. This has led to massive deforestation. I saw it throughout the region last year. Forests are being chopped down, environmental habitat is being lost, waterways are being polluted, etc., because the price of natural gas, oil, energy is too expensive for too many people. In extreme examples, I've heard people in Bosnia and Herzegovina mining their own coal, and further south in places like Kosovo and Northern Macedonia, people actually shredding tires to heat. And this is what happens when there's energy poverty and you don't have properly priced oil and gas or properly priced available energy. What's important here, the region must develop and stimulate its oil and gas potential and its energy reserves. As we heard from the previous presentation, as we'll hear from other presentations, there's tremendous potential for more oil and gas development in the region. Oil and gas companies are interested, and this must be stimulated going forward. There has been stuff happening, and other presentations will cover it. There's been a lot of movement in the past 16 months, stuff that's happening offshore in Crete, by Exxon, OMV Petrol in Romania, etc. People were saying 18 months ago would never happen. It's happening, but it's going too slow. Why is it going too slow? Why are we not getting reliable, efficient, stable supply of energy in the region that is cheaper and effective for all and stimulates industries? Well, because we need to give priority to development of oil and gas. I support CCS and CCUS, but for a region that is still relatively poor, that needs this energy, oil and gas that is local must be produced. As we've seen from various reports, demand isn't growing. This is going to be too expensive for the region to import from other areas. We need to provide political support for oil and gas exploration and development and CCUS. I've done some studies on CCUS. CCUS works if there is taxpayer funds to support it. Northern Lights in Norway, for example, that project is 80% supported by Northern Lights. Houston Hub in Texas is about 67 to 70% supported by a taxpayer CAS. So we can do this in the region as well. I understand there is places that CO2 could be stored. The geology shows that. The problem is emissions are pretty far away, but they're going to be shipping them in Norway, so that could work in the region. But the key issue is getting the taxpayer cash. To get this to move forward with all of this, we need to de-risk the below ground, which means seismic acquisition, studies, interpretation, sharing of data. And we particularly need to de-risk the above ground. A lot of IOCs and oil and gas companies have told me this in the region. That means streamlined and transparent rounds, streamlined and transparent fiscal regimes, contracts, legislation, and open door processes. That means openly and state what is available and what is not available. If the blocks are under dispute, let this be known. We need fiscal and contract stabilization. That means we have to stop the bait and switch. This has been a problem in several countries in the region where discoveries have been made, regulations and fiscal regimes have changed. Companies are interested, but they don't want baits and switch, and we need to have prompt issuance of permits. I didn't want to talk anymore, so these are my contacts, if you can see it. I hope you have seen some of it. I'll share this presentation. I've taken 8.5 minutes. I hope that's okay.
Thank you very much, George. Thank you very much for this comprehensive overview and also digging into the region. Please stick with us. Hopefully we'll have some time, although we are running out of time, for some Q&A. Our next speaker is Professor Victor Mocanu. He's a professor of geophysics and the dean of the geology and geophysics in University of Bucharest in Romania. And Professor Victor Mucanu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I would like to say a couple of words about what's going on in our part of the world. And I'm going to focus on Romania. And I was very happy, I have to confess, learning what the previous speaker mentioned, because I bear with him and I share most of the ideas he presented. And just a little story, a true one. It was September, early September last year, and I had the chance to visit in Houston, near Houston, Texas, the largest facility in the world for charging electric cars. More than 1,000 posts. More than 1,000 cars could be charged at the same time. And do you know what was the power used for this? Diesel. So I think personally that we are very far from the moment when we are going to be totally green. And I also think that we are very far from the moment when we'll see dominantly on the roads electric trucks. We are very far from flying electric airplanes. So for the moment, I'm afraid that the politicians didn't consider the long-term strategy. The realistic approach was not the best, in my modest opinion, and not only in my country, not only in our region, not only in Europe. I think that's the reality all around the world. And if there is a strong push in developed countries, just think about those countries which are so very far from reaching this level. The countries, for example, in Central West Africa, where they are still struggling to get a couple of hours of electricity per day, and the source is not really important. And we have to take care of the planet together. Anyway, so if we look at the distribution of electricity generation in Romania, I think we are in a very favorable case, having a pretty nice share of hydropower, which is about 25%, and nuclear, which is more than 20%, and we heard the very good news in the last couple of months with small modules to be in place in a number of years. And also, we learned that in the Polytechnical University of Bucharest, the first training center for the young generation is shaping up. Because as you know very well, in the nuclear industry, the things are not moving at once. It takes time. And having the young generation prepared to go forward and be really at the top of the training level necessary, first of all, for safety, it's a very good approach, I think. And this was done together with our partners from the US. Also, the gas industry is still very important. It's almost 20%. The wind industry picks up. And coal is still important, and as we learned from some other developed countries, probably we should be more careful about diminishing this source on a very short term. We still need it. What's going on nowadays, and what started pretty surprising to all of us early last year, I mean the conflict in Ukraine, and the crisis of energy we are all facing. People are really shaking because they didn't know if they can pay the bill or not. I think we better be careful. And I also tell my students that in a smartphone, which everybody is using, we have the entire or almost the entire Mendeleev table. So we will need all kinds of sources for the next decades. And one of them, in my modest opinion again, is oil and gas. So if we look at the particular case of my country, I think the distribution is pretty nicely in a kind of equilibrium, which I think, I don't know if it was the strategy, I don't know if it's the history, but I think the reality is pretty good. And I would like to see such example from some other countries. However, in the last couple of decades, the production decreased because of some reasons I'm going to explain, but the decrease was almost about 50%. in the last quarter of the century. And the tendency, the trend was the same in the last 5 years, and the trend is the same in the last year. So why this happens? First of all, the main oil fields in our part of the world are depleted, even if the production started more than 150 years ago. This is the reality. So we have to look carefully and try to investigate the new options, the new opportunities. However, 13 years ago, it was the 10th bidding round for oil and gas prospects in Romania. Nothing happened from the official point of view since then. Back in 2019, it was an announcement, an official announcement by the government that the bidding round is organized, and nothing happened. Of course, it was the COVID, and then it was the crisis, which we all know, and so on. On top of this, there is a complicated, very complicated and intricate geological structure. The wells to be drilled in the near future are deep, which means high cost. And because of the second point, the delay of the bidding round, it was a limited seismic which was shot in the last 3 years. So as of 2019, this was the list of the 28 blocks which were announced, and of course small, medium and large-scale companies from around the world started to be interested because again the prospects were pretty good. However, they are still looking and waiting. And as I do not work for the regulatory agency, I cannot really comment about the reasons. One of the most important targets in our area is the Black Sea, the Romanian Black Sea offshore, where, as you can see, the blocks were investigated in the last 40 plus years, and the new discovery, the Neptune Deep structure, was announced, and we hope in about 2 years or so, Petrom and Romgaz, the two giant companies, will put their forces together and the exploitation will start. And this is really one of the key targets for us, because this could bring not only gas independence of our country, but could put us in the favorable position of exporting gas, which will make at least the neighboring countries very happy, those who do not have this positive facility. I mentioned something about the complication of the Romanian geology, and I just showed this slide in order for you to get a general overview about what's the situation. We are at the contact between major plates, subplates. For example, in the southeastern part of Europe and going all the way towards Russia is the East European platform, old, cold, rigid, cratonic-like structure. But then the entire country is dominated by the Carpathian orogenic system, which develops all the way from Slovakia through southern Poland, Ukraine, Romania, and then turns down into Bulgaria and continues over the Bosphorus in Asia. And there are smaller but very interesting basins like the central Transylvanian basin, storing important resources of gas. And for this, we are very happy, but we still need investments, and we still need the support of the decision makers.
Victor, please sum up.
This is the last slide I wanted to show. The seismic exploration in the last 2 years, of course, diminished a lot. And you see here with blue the 3D seismic acquisition areas, and in red the 2D ones. But of course, no bidding rounds, no seismic acquisition, no advance in understanding. And questions, if we have time at the end. Thank you very much.
I appreciate. Fascinating presentation. Thank you. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. And now I'm very, very glad to invite Mr. Tassos Vlasopoulos. And again, sorry if I mispronounce your name. And Tassos is the CEO of the Hellenic Upstream, Hellenic Energy. He is from Greece, of course. So, Tassos, the floor is yours.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. How many minutes do I have?
You have about 10 minutes.
Okay, fine. That's fine. That's fine. Yeah. So I'm very glad to be here, actually, and give you my, my opinion and my intervention. I'm not going to use slides. I have slides, but I'm not going to use them. I'm going to speak to them. Okay, so that is it's probably easier. Just to give you a quick introduction about what Hellenic Petroleum is, in case you don't know. Actually, we called Hellenic Energy. We rebranded about a year ago. And we are probably one of the biggest energy companies in Southeastern Europe. We are primarily downstream company with 3 refineries. We have obviously marketing position with 2 brands, Eco and BP. We are in petrochemicals. We are definitely in power generation. Together with LP Edison, we have a position in the downstream with 2 CCGTs and also a retail position in gas and power. We are, of course, moving into the energy transition and the renewable business. We invest heavily in this, and also we are in the upstream business, in upstream E&P. We have 6 licenses with 2 operated ones and 4 others that they are not, non-operated. We are partnering with ExxonMobil in Crete and with Energean in Block 2. So I'm not going to go into the decision whether we need oil and gas or not. Of course we do need oil and gas, and we will be needing it in the next 20 or 30 years. Now, the degree of this, the need is probably going to change, as we also believe that the train of the energy transition has started, and then the question then becomes how we live together, right? Oil and gas and renewables live together. And for this reason, for us, the key thing is then what do we need to do in order to ensure a smooth transition? The transition is taking place. There's no question about this. But we need to have a smooth one. And to have a smooth transition, we need to have a number of things. And one of them is obviously having gas. Okay? There's no smooth transition without gas in the mix. And obviously you need to have technological innovation. You need to have different kind of compensating mechanisms to support the impact of the transition. We need to have support for citizens and customers, reallocating of capital and different financing structures. I want to then take a few minutes to actually talk about what we've done in the E&P business in the last few years. I think we are very happy to be in a position to have, of course, collected seismic in oil blocks in the last 15 months. This is a major, achievement, in my opinion, for Hellenic. We started about, we set out our strategy. We shifted our portfolio. We exited 3 licenses in 2021, and we are now having 6 licenses. In January last year, we shot back-to-back seismic in Block 10, Kiparisiakos Gulf, and the Ionian Block, having actually acquired 50% of Repsol's equity that exited a few months before that. And within 365 days, within a year, we also shot 3D seismic in these blocks. So in the 2 blocks that we are operating, I can say we shot 4 seismic campaigns, 2 times 2, 4. In addition, our partners around Crete, the Cretan blocks, shot 2D seismic, and Energean in Block 2, 3D. So our portfolio is effectively covered with seismic acquisition. So now the next step, effectively, the next step is, in processing and interpreting this seismic. This takes some time. We will have been in a position in 2024 to know what we need to do next. Okay, but after, you know, seeing the results of the interpretation. So we feel good about the progress we've made in the last few years, and we should not look for other sort of, and we will continue doing what we need to do in order to fulfill our obligations in the licenses that we have. As we need ENP in order to be, ensuring, a smooth energy transition, we also need, CCS, carbon capture and storage, in order to be able to reduce the emissions, right? And I'm going to talk about the needs for what is CCS, what are the barriers for CCS, and what are the key issues at this moment in Europe, but also what we need to do ourselves. And we, obviously our plans in Hellenic about this. We don't have production operations in the NP business, so we are not going to have carbon emissions from ourselves at this moment. From from the production of hydrocarbons, but we have refining operations, and we emit from our refining operations CO2. So we are studying to see what pilot programs we can have on this, and we have identified one. We are obviously at an early stage of looking what needs to be done in this case. So what is CCS? CO2 is being captured at the, let's say, at stock or in the hydrogen unit of a plant, of a refiner. Then it's transported either by the CO2, either by a pipeline, a vessel, or a truck, and then it gets injected into a depleted reservoir. That's a very simple, equation. In reality, it's a very complex operation because this market does not exist, has not happened yet. Okay, this is on paper at this moment, but it will happen. Okay, especially. It will happen. It's a lot of activity is taking place at this moment in Northern Europe, where most of the stores are. Okay, unfortunately, in the Med, the stores are not enough. I'll give you a number to keep. At this moment, the announcements for the North Sea, Northern Europe, is for 77 million tons per annum stores, storage capacity, whereas in the Mediterranean, the storage capacity is for about 7 million tons, Prinos and Ravenna, okay? So it means that there is, if you are in Southeastern Europe and you need to actually inject your CO2, either you need to ensure capacity in these two potential, they don't have FID, okay, storage unit, or to go all around, Gibraltar to the North Sea, or do not do capture. That's the very simple thing. So why do we need CCS? We need CCS in order to ensure asset competitiveness, either of the for the refinery, others for decarbonizing, for owners of oil gas production, to extend, prolong the life of the assets, and reuse the depleted oil fields or gas fields. The blockages, the bottleneck in the value chain are many, and the break-even prices for ensuring that this investment is successful, is good, varies depending on your geography. Where are you? What is the location, the geographic location, the type of operation you have? Are you a refiner or are you a cement plant? Different costs, different technologies, different stuff. Okay, so the key thing is at this moment there are immature frameworks from a legal and regulatory perspective, but they are being worked out. Okay, let's be honest. We are really at the beginning of a sector rather than at the end. And obviously, there is, in order for, because there is asymmetry between demand and supply, and I explain what I mean, there is, okay? Power shortage. I will continue. I think there is no power shortage. I think the lights are off. But I think at this moment there are not enough, stores, and therefore there is more demand for capture than there is for, potential storage. So it looks as if the current capacity available for storage will be after 2029. As one of the previous speakers mentioned, Northern Lights. Northern Lights is a very different thing. The Norwegian government has actually subsidized it significantly. It has not started operation. It's starting next year. Okay, so it's not operational yet, but it will operate, and it boils down to a very simple thing. We need, in order for this to be successful, we need to have financial support. And financial support obviously comes in many different forms. It can be in the forms of a grant, okay? And there is innovation funding, okay, in the case from the European Union. So there are a number of people who have made applications for this. And, or it can be carbon captures, carbon contracts for difference, ensuring that you have, let's say, some kind of compensating mechanism for the operating cost. So, as I said, so we are really at the beginning of an era, of where a market will be developing, but has not developed yet, okay? Everybody, the most important thing on CCS is to marry the timing of the demand, meaning the capture, and the supply from the stores. The transportation will be sorted out, in my opinion. I don't think transportation will be the bottleneck, and I think this will be in place. So, in short, I want to wrap up the discussion whether we need oil and gas or not. Of course, we do need oil and gas. We need to live together with many other fuels, and we will do that. And at the same time, so that's why you need gas exploration or an oil E&P as well. And obviously, in order to be able to decarbonize our industry and to contribute, we need CCS. And for that, obviously, we will need support. Okay? That's about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Tassos Vlasopoulos, for your overview. And indeed, you started to elaborate and deal with the carbon capture, utilization, storage. We'll continue to discuss that. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, but if there is some question from the audience regarding the wide array of issues that our esteemed colleagues discussed, and George, I hope that you are still with us from Canada. So that's the time. Somebody from the audience would like to raise a question. If not, I'll just raise a question to you, my fellow panelists. And George, hopefully, is George also online?
I'm here.
Yes, hello, George. So basically, but please, less than 1 minute reply. And it is floating here. Still, we need oil and gas, we need fossil fuels. But how are we going, indeed, to merge those two issues, to provide us with reliable, affordable energy and energy security while reaching the objective of net zero? How can we do that? Please, you started to speak about that. Please start. Yes.
Okay. I think we need to do a number of things in parallel amongst
you can maybe use the...
sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Hello. Yeah, I think we need to do a number of things in parallel, and different companies will actually play different roles. But above all, we need to have a clear framework, and to support industries that they need support at the time. We need to have streamlining of different processes, and to be able to move fast into deploying what we need to do. I don't think there is one answer for this. I think there is plenty of answers, and in 1 minute, I don't think we can answer it. Unfortunately, I think what we need to do is each one of us need to play the role, okay? And if to play the role, we need everybody, in my opinion. We need renewables. We need, technological advancement for renewables. We need CCS to get off the ground, but at the same time, we need the backup that comes from, hydrocarbons. Okay?
Thank you very much. And please, Professor Stavri, your take of that?
Okay. I fully agree with Mrs. Tassos, but I consider that in the case of Albania, we are in such position that actually we produce 100% of the energy based on renewables. We not use fossil fuels for energy generation, for electric generation, but in the meantime we have need for oil byproducts, for other activities. So we consider the possibility to develop the gasification of the country, because we have not yet a gas market, the gas infrastructure. We have only one important pipeline that passes Albania, Trans-Adriatic pipeline. And we think that the combination between the fossil fuels, especially gas, using for the industries and service sector, it would be good. And in the same time, we will continue with the renewables, because this is important, especially for the solar and wind. Anyway, the oil and gas will be needed, for my opinion, more than 2 or 3 or 5 decades.
Thank you very much, Stavri. And Professor Victor, what's your take on that?
Thank you very much. In my opinion, energy means security. And we definitely need all types of energy. And this is a must, not only in the daily life, but also looking forward. So what's the strategy? The strategy is to live together. And solar is free. Wind is free. Oil and gas is limited. So definitely in the future, we don't know if this is going to be 5 or 100 years. Definitely the most important components are going to be changed in energy industry, from fossil to we don't know what, but they will be together at least for the next generation, not only for ours.
Thank you very much, George. And lastly, George, the last word is yours. What's your take about the needs?
Thank you. For CCS, it's important that financing is put into place, taxpayer support. Regulations don't exist in Norway properly, nor the US, but with 67 to 80% financing, you can work. For Southeast Europe, which is a poor and proud region, it's important that we develop all of our energy resources, and that includes oil and gas. There are oil and gas resources in the region that can be developed. Oil and gas companies are interested. We need to move forward with this quickly, promptly. Acquiring seismic, streamlining regulations, opening license rounds, investors will come. It'll be good for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. And again, to remind us all, what are the objectives? The objectives are securing energy supply while reaching the goal and the objectives of net zero carbon emissions, let's say by 2050, hopefully before that, or most likely beyond that. And for that, we really need, as mentioned by all of the panelists and as the discussion, for the future discussion this day, we need renewable energy, we need clean transportation, we need, of course, even carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We need renaissance, possibly, of nuclear energy. And of course, most important of which, we need energy conservation. This is efficiency and saving. And hopefully, with all this array of means, we'll be able to achieve those two goals. So I really like to thank our panelists, Mr. George Kovacic, Professor Stavi Dima, Professor Victor Mukanu, and Mr. Tassos Vlaspopoulos. Thank you very much all, and give the applause. Thank you very much.